Okay, today we're going to be talking about macroeconomic equilibrium and how to correct an inflationary gap or recessionary gap. First thing we are required to do is draw our supply and demand curve. On the vertical axis, we will have price level. On the horizontal axis, we'll have our real GDP. The curve going upward with the upward slope is the short run aggregate supply curve, with the downward slope is the aggregate demand curve, as we know, and then we will illustrate our long run aggregate supply with a vertical line. Equilibrium being P1 and YP, or potential output. When the economy is operating in a inflationary gap, it would be illustrated with a long run aggregate supply curve to the left of equilibrium, and we now have what is called an inflationary gap. In order to correct an inflationary gap, the government would look to put two fiscal policies in place. They would either want to increase taxes, which would ultimately decrease disposable income, which would decrease consumer spending, causing a shift in the AD curve to the left. Okay, we're ultimately trying to return our equilibrium back down to long run aggregate supply. The other option that the government would have in terms of fiscal policies would be to decrease government spending, which would decrease the G part of our AD, and again shifting our aggregate demand curve to the left and back to long run equilibrium. If we wanted to draw an economy with a recessionary gap, that would look like this. The long run aggregate supply curve. The long run aggregate supply curve would be to the right of equilibrium. In order to return to equilibrium, the government would look for two fiscal policies to enact, and that would be either to decrease taxes, ultimately increasing disposable income and increasing consumption or consumer spending, or they would increase government spending, which ultimately increases the G in the GDP and the AD, shifting our AD curve to the right and to a new equilibrium point, thus closing this recessionary gap. This should serve as a review for the exercises that we did in class. Hope that helped.